we are so different. And yet, at some level, we're all human. And I wish in some ways that all of us could embrace that. I'm not imagining the world I'm writing, as in like, the setting of the world, right? The story is I'm imagining, but the setting is very, very authentic. I could see why someone, when they are in that position, would do a lot, the power of that power to attract. I think of a love triangle as really not necessarily just about the men or the women, but also lives that we could have had or not had. I think to be asked when they say, where are you from? And they'll say Washington, D.C., because what else are they going to say? I mean, all three of them are born in Washington, D.C., right? And somebody will say to them, no, where are you really from? I've really seen this concept of belonging from many sides. And in my characters, I think I bring that up. A world that everybody's striving for, or I want to be like this man, that. When you get to know them personally and well, and some of them, you realize, oh my God, they're really struggling. They're unhappy. There is so much, So I think that is something I wanted to explore in this book.
Hi, Chandrani, and welcome to the About Her Show, a show which is there for trailblazing women to talk about themselves, share their journey, their successes, failures, challenges, all of that. So that not only, like I said, they get to talk about themselves, but they also help us inspire other women with dreams and ambitions, but who are unable to, for whatever reason, follow their dreams. And then, along with women, we also get men on the show, men who champion such trailblazing women, because we believe that for a truly gender inclusive world, men and women need to be allies in this journey. Now, looking at you and your profile, well, you've, I think, had a fascinating journey starting from journalism to now, switching over to writing fiction. So, very interesting to see that, career, that part of your life where you hobnobbed with the rich and the famous, and now coming to a point where you are writing your own, how should I say, account of what you see in the world. Of course, it's fiction, but then impacted by what you've experienced as a journalist. So very, very interesting to see this transition. And we would definitely like to, know more about you and your journey. So once again, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. I'm really excited to be here.
So, well, likewise.
Thank you for, yes.
So let's get started. Now, as I understand, you've lived across so many cities from Kolkata, Delhi, London, Geneva, Kathmandu, and now, Washington, D.C. So tell me, how have these different worlds shaped the way you see people and tell stories?
So, well, yes, I have lived all over, and it's been, it's a life where change is, I would say that where change is something I take for granted, right? Like for me, I've always I've lived in so many different places that I think of it like it makes me less polarized in my view. I tend to see the world I think in today's world where it is so polarizing, when you've lived in many places, one of the things you realize is there's differences, but at some level, we're all humans and we're also very similar. So this is where I think the contradiction of this lies, right? Like in one way, yes, the Swiss in Geneva, always punctual. They show up, if you invite them at 7, they're there, dot at 7. And then, of course, there's the Indians, and yet at some level, you also realize we're all humans. And the same things bother them, the jealousies, the heartaches, the things. So there is this funny thing of both seeing we are so different, and yet at some level we're all human. And I wish in some ways that all of us could embrace that, right? Like in a world that is getting so polarized, it would be nice if people could see that the basic humanity that runs through in spite of our differences. So that would be and I think it impacts the way I see the world.
But actually, that's the way it is because, really, if you look at it, we are all humans. We have, we're similar in many, many ways. It's only these differences which are superficial, which are man-made created, which actually create all the distinctions. So yes, as humans, we are very, very similar. And it's not difficult to relate to each other if we actually just let go of, these layers which are there. Okay.
Right. Because the layers are pretty superficial. Like, they are facades we wear, just like, our skin color is different, the way we look is different. But
Right.
inside, like, we're really the same people, right? And so, yeah, I think that humanity that exists, I wish in this very polarized world we could see that.
Right, right. So now, as I understand, before becoming a novelist, you had an
Mhm.
incredible journalism career with Time, Forbes, Business Standard, and all. So tell me, what made you move from reporting real events to writing fiction?
So I would start by saying that it's not so much that I didn't like being a journalist that made me move careers. I really loved my years as a journalist, and it was very, very fulfilling. So, so it was not a rejection of one as much as a desire for, finding something new and interesting in some ways, but
Mm.
also realizing what is it about journalism that drew me in the first place, right? So I realized that, yeah, I mean, chasing an interesting article story was there. Like, I like the investigative piece of it, but often the people is what fascinated. By
Right.
which I mean, like, say I was a journalist at Forbes, and I remember going to meet this gentleman who had just started a company. He had a really interesting product. It was actually in the export import business. It was a software. He was revolutionizing that field, how people were dealing with all this crazy paperwork that went with export import. I went there. That was a story I was supposed to write. I asked him, but I was fascinated by how he got there, his family story. There was all of this, but there was no place to write that in Forbes. Like, I could make one mention of his, right? And so I realized I love the people part of this, right? Getting to know. And so I think from that to writing a story and writing a story which is, so human centric, people centric, was not that much of a leap. But also the other side of it is I come from a family of writers. I have two cousins who are pretty well-known writers, people, and then I have an uncle who's written several books. So there is a family of writers. So I think I kind of it was not an alien world to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think between like, yeah, and I'm at that stage where I wanted to explore something new, and it seemed like a good move. And now that the book is here, it seems like I'm glad I did this.
Great, great. So basically, I think you just kind of extended your writing skills in that way. So just from reporting, you went into more detailing, describing people, incidents in a greater detail, which I think somewhere you always wanted to do. Okay.
Right, right. Now that is the
So tell me, this is very interesting. Now, while covering the Clinton White House for Time, you
Mhm.
traveled on Air Force One and Marine One, something which I think most people can only dream of because you only see this in movies. So tell me, what was it like to witness the machinery of American power so closely? And did that experience influence the world of Heartlines?
It absolutely influences Heartlines, right? Like, so I feel like it makes Heartlines very authentic. Like, I'm not imagining the world I'm writing, as
Mm-hmm.
in, like, the setting of the world, right? The story is I'm imagining, but the setting is very, very authentic. And I think that gives Heartlines, in my opinion, a certain it's not, not to say that a person can imagine, a writer can imagine a very detailed world, and there is, of course, power in that. But
Yeah.
in my case, when I talk about, say, the wine that's being served at a lobbyist party, when a lobbyist on K Street hosts a party, compared to the wine that's served at a White House state dinner, uh, I know what I'm talking about, right? I'm not just sort of just throwing this out and throwing two wine. Like, I can tell you where more money is being spent, and it is true, right? Or when I talk about these hideaways that the senators get, most people wouldn't have heard of that, right? But it makes my book more authentic because
Right.
I'm telling you about a world that I know deeply, I've been involved with, and in its own ways it comes through. I think it just makes, even if it may be a one line reference somewhere, right? Like, it's just in the descriptions, but it makes it an authentic description.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the, yeah. So whether it is, and you're right, like, my sort of being on Air Force One or Marine One. These were very, very exciting things to. I was very lucky to be able to do this, but I definitely had a ringside view on power, and in Washington D.C., which will justifiably be the most powerful city in the world. So it is a experience that I'm very grateful for. But I think it makes Heartlines the book it is.
Yeah, yeah. So yes, you're right. It has brought in a lot of authenticity because you actually have seen all that, like rather than imagining it or kind of, relating to it in a way, based on a movie or a book that you've written, you've actually seen it. So obviously it adds that element of authenticity to the whole thing.
Right.
So tell me, at Forbes also, you worked on the iconic Forbes Rich List and interacted with some fascinating personalities, from lunch with Richard Branson to getting a call from Donald Trump's office. Again, like, something very cool. So tell me, what did those encounters teach you about power, ego, and ambition?
So again, I feel like, when I say, like, when I talk about power, this is really like power at its raw, is like the most absolute form. Like in our world today, to be in Washington, D.C., is the power center. Similarly, I do feel like the rich list is the world's richest people. It's not just some rich people. It is the world's 400 richest people you're dealing with, right? So these are, in some ways, the highest points of each of these. And so I do feel like my having that access, being able to see that, really made me sort of, what shall I say? It made me understand in some ways what it is about power that is so attractive. Like I'll say, like, when you mentioned Marine One or something, like, so think of it. If you're the president, right? You fly in you're going to New York City, say. You fly in on Air Force One into the airbase, right? From where you're taken by these helicopters to Wall Street. You get off at the Wall Street helipad. Then the streets are shut for you. This is Manhattan, one of the busiest places in the world. And you whiz down Manhattan to wherever, like maybe you're going to, I remember once going with President Clinton to Radio City Hall, right in Midtown, right? Yeah. Means the streets are clear. You show up, like it's heady, right? Like you can see why someone, when they are in that position, would do a lot. The power of that power to attract is big, and that's what I think I again got to see those. And so when I write about them, I think I'm saying things that I've seen at its peak. So that's, I would say, that influences Heartline. And so it's both the financial one, which is Forbes, and when I worked for Time, it was power in the political sense. And that's the two worlds that I sort of had very upfront, close ringside views on.
So that means you're saying that your exposure to this, to these political and financial power structures so up close have influenced your characters and the relationships in your book, right?
Right. Yeah. Like, the Lionel character, what he is, how he understands power, his understanding of power, right? Like, it's something that I feel like I have an understanding of power. So I could, as a journalist in that, know when he says certain things, he gets it. And then how that's different from the way a tech guy sees power. Anyway, so, we'll get into the book maybe more, but so yeah, I think it definitely influences the book heavily. So,
right. So coming to the book now, this book, which is your debut book, Heartlines, is set in Washington. I mean, I guess that is to be expected. And it explores a love triangle within the world of politics and media. So my question is, what drew you to tell this particular story?
So the setting of it is because, like we were talking about, it's a world I know really well. I know this world intimately. So that setting in where media, I describe the book as at the nexus of media, politics, and the high-tech world. And these three really are the setting in which I have placed my book. I know this world well. And this question of the love triangle, why is it a love triangle? Because I really think two things. One is that I think love triangles are more common than maybe we would all, I think maybe not in exactly like there's too many, but many times in life, and I'm sure maybe Sangeeta, you yourself have experienced it, when you say no to something, right? Like so to me, let me go back. I think of a love triangle as really not necessarily just about the men or the women, but also lives that we could have had or not had.
Right.
When you choose, you say no to something, right? Like you turn down, like, maybe it's even an arranged marriage and you turn down an offer of a marriage, right? There's a life not led. And I'm not, we don't know what that life would have led to. So these are paths not taken versus paths taken. And how that works out is the life we end up with. And so I think I like that whole idea of seeing the love triangle as a point at which big decisions end up being made for the rest of your life. And how it unfolds. Because at that point, you kind of had two choices or two paths you could have taken. And you took one, you can only take one. And then that leads to the life you have. And so I just found that intriguing as an idea. And that's one of the things I was exploring when I wrote this book. So
it is actually very interesting. And you rightly point out, because we always have choices in life. And obviously, you cannot make all choices. You pick one. And the one you pick leads you to a life that you lead. And the one that you don't obviously means a life not led. So, yeah, very interesting. And I don't think a lot of us even look at things like that, but this is what it is. Okay.
Yeah, because I think many people have actually made these choices. They just never thought that that's what they were in. They were in points of inflection in their life where they could have gone this way or that way.
Right.
And which one they picked is what they've ended up. So you think, oh, this was where my life was supposed to go. But maybe one small change somewhere would have led to a completely different. And in the biggest ways, of course, the person you choose to marry or at least be with makes the biggest, I think, decision, impact on the life you end up with.
Yeah.
So
coming to your protagonist, Sharmila Basu. Now, she is a journalist who's navigating ambition, love, and identity. So tell me, did your own newsroom experiences shape her character in any way?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I was that young person in a newsroom making my way up that ladder. And I know what that feels like to be, both, as you mentioned, I worked as a journalist in India first. So I had a certain, I had reached a certain level. Then I sort of started out fresh in the US. I was an intern when I started at Time Magazine. Then I moved up that one. Then I worked at Forbes. So absolutely, I know how that feels. I know when you are ambitious and you want to do, do the best you can. And sometimes the various factors that come into play, I show Sharmila's boss in the book as somebody who both is wishing her well, really rooting for her, but at some level is also a little paternalistic, a little bit, and that's something I think many women face, and then not just in journalism, right? All of us, even when it's good, I'm not even I'm not saying this isn't this was, even in the best of situations, sometimes there is the patriarchy is so strong, and we women, and even in today's world, are often, even when you're doing well, it's a little, wow, you're doing well. Not it's different when a guy does well versus a woman does well. Correct. And I think I was showing those, trying to show those through Sharmila's story, what it feels like to be in that newsroom. And as her life unfolds and unravels a little bit, how that changes too, right? At some level, she's the golden girl in the newsroom when you begin, she's getting all the headline stories, the cover stories, and then how that changes as the story moves on. And again, I think there is some authenticity to it because I understand that. I've been there. I've been that young person in that newsroom, hungry to do well and, land a great story. And then also, and then that's the fictional bit comes in where I show the unraveling. So, yes.
Okay. Interesting. So I guess, whenever someone is writing something, and I, being a writer, I totally understand you do draw upon your own life experiences because
Right.
that's, I think, the reserve that you've built up, of information, knowledge, experiences, which obviously are going to impact your piece of writing. So
Right.
now this book is described as a love story, but
Mhm.
also a meditation on conscience and identity. So tell me, what were the deeper questions you wanted to explore through this narrative?
You know, Sakita, that is a great question. And I was thinking, when when you're asking me this question, that so I will say my writing was a little bit of stream of consciousness happening, right? I started with these characters. It was during COVID. I had some characters in my head. Hmm. So I started by really fleshing out these characters, writing them out, like the Mrs. Jhunjhunwala character, right? I mean, she was somebody who was very she sort of had lived in my head for a while. I put her down. Sharmila, as so I let the story kind of unfold as it was happening.
Okay.
And I think which is why this is, it wasn't so much as a uh, pre thought out, oh, there's a morality or there is something that I wanted to tell this story, which is, I think, very human. Like if you think of, and this is without giving too much away, the character of Mark, for example, right? I think I present him in all his flaws, and yet I think many people would be rooting for him, right? Means he is not, without giving away what he does wrong, like, he's not unlikable for it. He's not a villain because, and I think that's what I was trying to show, right? Like that there is in, that it's not black and white, and not even just the main characters, even the minor characters in the book. They You are rooting for people who are not always doing the right things, but I'm showing the humanity in them. Like they're, and that's what I think is what makes the story maybe this, hopefully compelling to people. That there is no, like, I wasn't sitting, like, I didn't have a preconceived notion when I started this book that, hey, I want to show this or that I wanted it to be absolutely entertaining, which I hope it is, and that it's a story, fast-paced story that moves. I wanted that to happen. And the characters, I wanted them to be really human. Right. And nuanced in a way that I think the world is full of, right? Many of us have friends who've done horrible things, but then are really good, maybe parents, or are or really good friend to me, or but at the same time you see something in them that is so appalling. And I wanted to bring all of that to life, like what is, that, so my characters are like that. I don't think I necessarily set out to um, make them play a certain role or say a certain thing, right? Like I wanted them to be as human and live their life through this story. It was not a premeditated idea of I wanted to make them moral or not moral.
Right. So, that is what brings authenticity and relatability also, because when the character is human, people will be able to relate to the character. Because everybody makes mistakes, everybody has a dark side, a not so good side to them. So, when you read about such characters, you can relate to them. And I think that is what makes a book a compelling read, because you're not reading something which is, okay, it's not a fairy tale. It's about human
Right.
beings. So, it has to be real
Right.
and there have to be layers. So yeah, that I think is
Right.
very, very
Yeah, and it's not, yeah, no, but none of them are perfect. They're all flawed, and you can still, like, fall in love with someone and live this, and yet in other ways, yeah, their flaws make them human. And I don't think, I mean, like all my characters, I think at some level are very likable, even when they're flawed.
Right.
And so you're rooting for them.
Correct. Correct. So tell me, the book also touches on the Indian American experience and the idea of belonging between cultures. So, how much of that once again reflects your own life journey?
Yeah, I think I'm a good person to talk about belonging because, again, having moved so much, but also, Sangeeta, the thing is that So I am I'm like basically a first generation person who's gone there, right? I was an adult when I moved to the US. So I lived in certain other places as well. But fundamentally, I was this person who came to the US in her mid-20s as an outsider who was building and then went on to build a life there. Right. I'm married to my husband, is very much American in the sense he was born there. My in-laws had moved there in the 1950s. He's very American, right? And he's that second generation person. And then you think of my kids, right? They are of both worlds, right? So they're really, in some ways, I would say, they're American because they have a father who's like, they're the third generation of people living there. On this side, they're the second generation. And yet, they're very Indian too. Like if you were to meet my kids, they're at some level very Indian kids who have this. So then you start to think, what is to be American? Because what they should be, they are American, like, really, really, born there. And so I think I have a lot of lens on this world. There is that world of the American born Indian. There's the world of the Indian who's come there. And and I feel like I'm sitting and seeing this world from many views, especially when you have children, right? You see how they are impacted. Like at some level, it's really strange to my children and even my husband to be asked when they say, where are you from? And they'll say Washington, D.C., because what else are they going to say? I mean, all three of them are born in Washington, D.C., right? And somebody will say to them, no, where are you really from? And, and they look like that's a really strange question at some level. But of course, I also get that person's point of view. Hey, you're a brown-skinned person. And, what do you mean you're from Washington, D.C.? And so I see them sometimes struggle with that question. Sometimes I see them take it in their stride and say, yes, I have Indian heritage. My grandparents came from India. My mother's from India. And sometimes they're very happy to embrace that. And especially as kids, and sometimes they're not. And they're very like, no, I'm from Washington, D.C. And now let's see what you're going to say to me, right?
Right. Yeah,
so, so I think I've really seen this concept of belonging from many sides. And in my characters, I think I bring that up. I think, again, Sharmila and Mark are two people who have a good conversation about this at some point in the book. And, because Sharmila makes the point that she grew up in a world in India where everybody was the same. She was the majority. So then for her to be a little different was not such a hardship, right? In fact, it was kind of cool. You wanted to be a little different because everybody was like you. And Mark was saying he grew up in a world where no one was like him, right? This is like, 1980s, 90s America, where there's not that many brown people in his room. And he wants to belong. Like, it's important to him. So he's like desperate to not have an accent. She's kind of like, it's kind of cool to have an accent and sound different from the mainstream.
Right. Right. So like they say, different things to different people, because everybody comes with their set of experiences, their set of expectations. So, the same thing is kind of taken in or absorbed differently by different people, depending on where they come from. Okay.
Right.
So coming to Sharmila once again. Now, she appears to have everything, the career, the life, the relationship, yet she feels that there is something missing. So, what fascinated you about exploring that tension between outward success and inner conflict?
Yes, great question. Thank you. And, this is something that, again, I would say pretty lucky to have seen very, very successful people very close up. Like, people, like I've seen these, whether it's through work, the billionaires, that I'm talking about at Forbes, but also in this high-tech world in DC where I live, there are very, very successful Indian Americans who really at the top of their game, Indian Americans who are on top of their game in politics, in, media. And one of those things is when you're a young person, you're the outsider, you're looking at it and saying, wow, if I could only be there, right? What a perfect world it would be. But when you see these people close up and you get to know them, you realize like, oh my God, no, there is not all of them. Some are perfectly happy and really like, but so many of them are conflicted. There's so much tension, like this thing. So this picture perfect world that everybody's striving for. Or I want to be like this man, that when you get to know them personally and well, and some of them you realize, oh my God, they're really struggling. They're unhappy. There is so much, So I think that is something I wanted to explore in this book. Like, here is Sharmila, that perfect, the power corridors of DC. This woman lives this, with the boyfriend who's like the American heartthrob. She lives in Georgetown, which is as swanky a neighborhood as it gets. Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to, this whole idea of the conflict that she is feeling, I wanted to explore that. And I think hopefully many people will relate to it, right? Because when we're young, especially, and you have this feeling like, oh, if I could only achieve that, it'll all fall into place.
Right.
And then you get there and you realize that, yeah, I mean, some people are, but they would have been happy maybe in a completely, they don't have to be that successful to be. So success is not necessarily the only way to have, a good life.
Yes.
There is, and that's something that, maybe I've seen up front close. So I wanted to explore that in the book, this idea of the perfect world that's not perfect.
Very interesting, because it's true, and I think when you're young, your definition of a perfect world is very different from that definition as you grow older, because you realize, as you said, the perfect is not really perfect, because like they say, the grass is always greener on the other side, but when you go on the other side, you realize how actually green it is. So there are always two sides to the kind of lives that you see, and as you grow older, you realize that. So yeah, I guess there is always this kind of a conflict. Okay.
Right.
Now, going back to your journalistic career. Now, journalists are trained to observe the world with precision. So how did those instincts help you when it came to building characters and emotional depth in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, like, as a journalist, you tend to meet a lot of people, you interview a lot of people, you get to ask them all kinds of questions because you have the right to do that. Right. So I feel like, yes, I feel like I have a lot of experiences to draw from. I've lived sort of a large life in terms of experiences, so those help me build my characters. I think with some, they're authentic because of that to some extent. I think being a journalist also helped me pace my book better. I feel like I've been getting feedback from people on this, that how the book moves so comfortably. There's no, like, it doesn't stagnate. It's there's a pacing of the book that maybe comes from years of, like, especially as a journalist in the US, I was really taught to be kind of precise with my writing, like not to pad it too heavily, like not to have lots of superfluous words, extra things, like, be direct to the point. And I think my book in some ways is that. It's written with a very clean style, which comes from my journalism training. It is, and so the pacing of the book is what I'm getting a lot of very positive feedback now, that people are, it's out in the world and people are coming back to me. They're like, oh my God, it just reads so effortlessly, right? And there's no, like, there's not, it doesn't stagnate. Right. And that, I think, comes from my journalism training again, right? And so I think, hopefully the book is richer and better for having been trained for years as a journalist.
Yeah, so I guess that, I think, is a wonderful compliment when you say that the book reads effortlessly, because if you have to struggle with that as a reader, you will not enjoy. So I guess that's what it is, being precise, being able to manage the flow of events. That is what makes a book interesting. Okay. So tell me, after almost 12 years of telling other people's stories as a journalist, how does it feel to finally tell one that comes entirely from your own imagination?
It's been very joyful, I would say. It's just been, it's been very freeing to be able to do this. I had not realized how, that this creative side, how fulfilling it is to let that explode, and, to explore the creativity that, I'm sure many of us have it in us. But you don't always get a chance in your adult life, right? Like as a child, you play, you have, imaginary, play dates and all of that, like, where children are allowed to have deep imaginary worlds. But then when you become an adult, we don't get that chance, right? And but it's a very deeply satisfying and satisfying place to be. I felt very privileged to have that time, and now this is my new career that I'm like, wow, I can look forward to, being allowed to let my creative side, my imagination,
Right.
like run free. And that really, like, if you think of it, Sangeeta, how often as adults does that happen? Like, you remember as a child, you're playing, you're playing house and you're playing teacher and whatever, like, you're playing doctor. This is all imaginary. And it's so fun as a child, but somewhere you stop doing that, right? Nobody, as an adult, you don't get to do that. But being a writer allows you to do that. And that's your job. You're allowed to be.
Yes, absolutely.
So I realized that it's very fulfilling creatively. And so I'm really excited to sort of at this stage in life be given this license to let my imagination free.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, how freeing it is to be able to do exactly what you want to do, dream of what you want to dream, write about what you want to write. So, yes, I can totally get that. So, Chandrani, while we've come to the end of the conversation, we still have the rapid fire round, which is 5 quick questions followed by 5 quick answers. So, are you ready for that?
Sure, ready to go.
All right. Okay, so starting with the first one. A city that most influenced your writing choice.
Calcutta. And you're also catching me from Calcutta. So I'm right now visiting my original hometown. And I'm here. And it is definitely a city that is has a huge place in my heart and is very important to me.
All right. The next one. One interview you'll never forget.
Ooh, okay. Oh my God. I'm trying to think. There's lots. So I would say maybe the Richard Branson one, because that was pretty, it was heady. I was very young when I did it also. Okay. So, to meet somebody so iconic and to have like sort of this one-on-one time with him. He's a very charismatic, man with like, and so much, like such zest for life. And, it was definitely one that I will forever remember.
Right, right. The next one. One book you would recommend to every aspiring writer.
Ooh. I would say, I know everyone says this, but I do think any Hemingway is the way to go. Like I love that minimalist style. I like it. I mean, it's to me, that clarity that, I don't necessarily like, the lack of extra words is great training. Whether then you choose to add more, you can. But I think Hemingway is the ultimate writer when it comes to, the sparse style is to be.
Okay. So the next one. One word to describe Sharmila.
Ooh. One word. Oh my God. I guess I would say charismatic. Like, I think she has like that, because charisma to me brings a lot of different things. To be charismatic is to have like, that, I would say it's hard to be, if you're charismatic, it's likely that you're a very, interesting, intelligent person. You're likely a good conversationalist. You're likely, so there's a lot of things that go towards as a warmth to a person. And I think that she is, to me, a very charismatic person. And so that would be my word for her.
Okay. And finally, are you a morning or a night writer? When do you write?
Morning. I feel I'm definitely an early morning person. My energy levels, I wake up very awake. So best for me to get most of my work done on the early side as it comes. Yeah. Yes, I can't work. I can stay up late and party, but I cannot work late. I'll be asleep within seconds if I sat down at my desk late. So.
Okay. So that's it. And thank you very much. I must say a very, very fascinating conversation. I mean, I was expecting this, after that interaction we had, because I found you to be a very interesting person. So I was really looking forward to having this conversation with you. And yes, you've proved me right. So thank you very, very much for being on the show and looking forward to catching you up again. Yeah.
Sangeeta, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I really must say, you have really you read the book with care. your questions are thoughtful, and that really comes through. And it makes it like, from my side, just it's a privilege to be asked smart questions by someone who's, has taken the care to do it. Like, these are not like, you don't ask run-of-the-mill questions that are, standard questions that everyone's like, you've thought through these. And I really appreciate that. So thank you very much for having me. I hope your readers will read Heartlines and, that they will go out there after this and say, okay, this is a book that they're interested in.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure. Okay. Thank you for tuning in to the About Her show. If you enjoyed this episode, there's plenty more from where that came from. Our previous guests have shared some amazing stories, so be sure to catch up on past episodes. To keep up with our inspiring conversations and to never miss an update, hit subscribe, rate, review, and share the love. Follow us on social media for some great content, and don't forget to check out our website www.aboutherbysangeeta.com for stories that resonate, inspire, and empower. Know a remarkable woman or an inspiring man blazing a trail? We'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note at web.abouther@gmail.com and let's bring their story to life on the About Her show.